The information provided in this PowerPoint was taken from the Benghazi Brief, authored by Sundance. Please go to the Conservative Treehouse website, listed above, for the complete article. Thank you. And now, Operation Zero Footprint, the story DC doesn't want you to know. Operation Zero Footprint. We know the Libyan uprising began on February 10th of 2011, and we also know that sometime around the end of February 2011, President Obama signed a presidential directive authorizing the State Department and CIA to begin a covert operation to arm the Libyan rebels. We also know of a second presidential finding memo authorizing additional CIA covert action in 2012, this time in Syria. However, unlike the 2011 Libyan operation, we do not know the operational name of the second action in 2012 in Syria. We know the Libyan rebels were positioned in two strategic places, Benghazi and the port city of Darna, both located in northeastern Libya. We know this 2011 Libyan covert operation came to be known as Operation Zero Footprint and fell under the military command authority of NATO, not the U.S. military. We know by the time Operation Zero Footprint began, AFRICOM Commander General Carter Ham was removed from OPSEC, Operational Security, oversight in the Libyan campaign, and NATO Commander Admiral James G. Stavridis was in charge. He was the perfect pick for NATO Libyan intervention, considering he is the son of Turkish immigrants. Turkey played a key role in what might be the most politically dangerous aspect of the events to the White House once the goals changed to redirection of the weapons from Operation Zero Footprint. We know Operation Zero Footprint was the covert transfer of weapons from the U.S. to the Libyan rebels. We also know the operation avoided the concerns with congressional funding and potential public scrutiny through financing by the United Arab Emirates. We also know that officials within the government of Qatar served as the intermediaries for the actual transfer of the weapons, thereby removing the footprint of the U.S. intervention. We know the entire operation was coordinated and controlled by the State Department and CIA. We also know from the Senate for Foreign Relations Benghazi hearings that Zero Footprint was unknown to the 2011 Pentagon or Department of Defense commanders who would have been tasked with any military response to the 9/11/2012 attack, namely AFRICOM General Carter Ham. Slide 2, Gang of Eight. We know the White House appears to have followed the Intelligence Oversight Act of 1980, informing the Congressional Gang of Eight of Zero Footprint. The Gang of Eight in 2011 would have included Speaker John Boehner, Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, and Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid. House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence Chairman Mike Rogers and his Democrat counterpart Charles Rupertsberger, along with Senate Intel Chair Dianne Feinstein and a Republican counterpart Saxby Chambliss. Slide 3, Libyan Rebel Commanders. The known crowd would include the ultimate end destination users, the Libyan Rebel Commanders. Rebel leader, Islamic Fighting Group, Abu Safin bin Kuma, Darna Brigade, Ansar al-Sharia. Rebel leader, Islamic Fighting Group, Abdu Katala, commander of Islamic militant group called the Abdu Obada bin Jarrah Brigade, or 17th February Brigade, Benghazi, Ansar al-Sharia. Note, Both of these individuals were labeled as officially recognized State Department terrorists in December of 2013, Katala recently having been arrested June of 2014. We know in late February 2011, President Obama signed a presidential finding memo authorizing the State Department and CIA to engage in actions within Libya to identify a course of action. We know in March 2011, when Hillary Clinton, State Department, and Leon Panetta, CIA, constructed Operation Zero Footprint, that President Obama approved the covert action and then informed the Gang of Eight of the weapons transfer operation. During March, April, and May of 2011, there was enough intelligence information flowing to the White House, informing them of exactly who would be the beneficiaries of U.S. Libyan involvement and specifically providing weapons. It did not take long to identify the Benghazi and Darna rebels were actually affiliates of Al-Qaeda. Slide 4, Regime Change in the Middle East. From a policy standpoint, it will have to be left up to historians to pore over the facts and ultimately decide what was this White House goal in the entire region. My thought, caliphate. Ben Ali's removal in Tunisia seemed okay to the administration, Obama and Clinton. Hosni Mubarak removal from Egypt seemed even more okay to Obama and Clinton, which was replaced by Morsi, Muslim Brotherhood. However, when you get to Gaddafi's removal, Libya, there was a serious split between ideologies within the U.S. political class as Obama-Clinton actually pushed the outcome. The U.S. Defense Department saying they were apprehensive about this outcome, and Obama-Clinton going all in for Gaddafi's ouster. We know on October 20th, 2011, Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi was finally captured, then killed by the rebels. From the standpoint of regime change, Operation Zero Footprint was a success. We know Eastern Libya was then, in 2011, and is now a hotbed of radical Islam controlled by the Libyan Islamic fighting groups, the very people who benefited from the arms that were part of Zero Footprint. We know by the fall-winter of 2011, the U.S. State Department and CIA were joined in trying to resecure the same weapons they provided in the spring and summer. Slide 5, Operation Zero Footprint, it all goes wrong. If the story ended there, it would be bad enough. A flawed policy, a secret mission to arm the Libyan rebels without a great deal of thinking through the longer-term consequences. A flawed policy with political consequences. But when you think about the larger picture, you understand why the details of the covert weapons operations Zero Footprint were so tightly guarded among select members of Congress, the Gang of Eight, the CIA Panetta, and the State Department Clinton, and the White House. Each of them was trying to manage a covert operation that would expose a U.S. policy decision to arm Al-Qaeda, the Muslim Brotherhood, and other Islamist militants. Slide 6. Obama-Clinton decisions get much worse. The uprising in Syria was only a few months behind the uprising in Libya. Arguably, if the timing were reversed, you could ponder that Assad would have met Gaddafi's fate, and Gaddafi would be as alive today as President Assad. Whichever rebel group got the attention of the R2P crowd, responsibility to protect, was sure to be the first to get assistance. The Obama R2P doctrine is so tenuous and so lacking in political principle, it's subject to change based on the political whims of Capitol Hill at any given moment. The Libyan rebels got all the weaponry love. The Syrian rebels not so much, at least in 2011. By mid-2012, that sentiment appears to have changed. Enter Hillary Clinton, as she reiterated vehemently it was Hillary who wanted to help the Syrian rebels when no one else wanted to assist them. Secretary Hillary Clinton wanted early and direct action in Syria to topple Assad, just like Gaddafi. Slide 7, Weapons to Syria. 2012, NBC News reported that the Free Syrian Army had obtained nearly 24 surface-to-air missiles, weapons that could be used against Assad's helicopters and fixed-wing aircraft. NBC said the shoulder-fired missiles, also known as man-pads, had been delivered to the rebels via Turkey. On Wednesday, however, Bassam al-Dada, a political advisor to the Free Syrian Army, denied the NBC report, telling the Arabic-language TV network El Arabiya that the group had not obtained any such weapons at all. U.S. government sources said they could not confirm the man-pads deliveries, but could not rule them out either. Note how the Free Syrian Army says they didn't get missiles, and yet missiles were shipped. This is important against the backdrop of the reality the extreme elements we now call ISIL were operating in Syria and openly laughing at our inability to identify them. Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Turkey. The basic setup to arm the Syrian rebellion was generally not too complex. Turkey would be used as the distribution hub, and the U.S. had Sunni friends in Saudi Arabia and Qatar, who were more than willing to see Assad removed and financially assist in arming the Syrians. For Obama Clinton to get weapons to the Syrians against the shadow of Operation Zero Footprint without going extensively through Congress could be done covertly and easily. Either ship weapons just like Operation Zero Footprint, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Turkey to Syria, or buy back the weapons already floating around from Operation Zero Footprint and redirect them to Syria through Turkey, or both. What is MANPADS? MANPADS are a man-portable air defense systems. MANPADS, or MPADS, are shoulder-launched surface-to-air missiles, SAMs. They are typically guided weapons and are a threat to low-flying aircraft, especially helicopters. The shipment. We know on September 5, 2012, a Libyan-flagged ship called El Entistar docks in the Turkish port of Iskenderun. It is carrying 400 tons of cargo, including many weapons such as rocket-propelled grenades, RPGs, and shoulder-launched surface-to-air missiles, MANPADS, destined for Syrian rebels 35 miles away from Iskenderun. The ship's captain told the Times of London that the Muslim Brotherhood and the Free Syrian Army broke into a fight over the arms. The Syrian opposition had 3 al-Qaeda arms operating within it, including one that also operated in Libya, Jund al-Sham, which is made up of al-Qaeda militants who are a strain of Palestinian and Lebanese. Jund al-Islam, which in recent years merged with Ansar al-Islam, an extremist group of Sunni Iraqis operating under the al-Qaeda banner and operating in Yemen and Libya. Jund Ansar al-Allah, an al-Qaeda group based in Gaza, is linked to Palestinian camps in Lebanon and Syria. Senator McCain and friends. It would be into this eclectic mix of jihadist ideologies, which later became ISIS, that any diverted U.S. arms would flow. It's no wonder that Senator John McCain was so confused when he was calling them moderates in 2012-2013. Almost no one knew the severe elements in Syria would rise to the surface and become the modern ISIS now capturing all of the global attention. If Operation Zero Footprint in Libya was stupid, arming the Syrian branches of al-Qaeda 2 years after the Free Syrian Army was thoroughly corrupted by al-Qaeda is infinite degrees beyond stupid. 3 events, 1 night. In the United States on September 5, 2012, former President Bill Clinton was introducing candidate Barack Obama at the DNC convention in Charlotte, North Carolina. In Afghanistan that night, something happened that had already become a serious concern for the operatives within Operation Zero Footprint. At the exact time Clinton was speaking in North Carolina, halfway around the world in Afghanistan, Army Chief Warrant Officers Talia S. Ramirez, 28 of San Antonio, and Jose L. Montenegro, Jr., 31 of San Juan in the Rio Grande Valley, were killed while flying an OH-58D Kiowa Warrior helicopter. Also on September 5, 2012, a U.S. organized ship loaded with weapons including missiles was offloading at a Turkish port. Bill Clinton was introducing Barack Obama, and the first black female combat pilot was shot down and killed by a shoulder-fired missile in Afghanistan. The relationship between the 3 events reflects the absolute political fear that revolved around Operation Zero Footprint. The CIA and intelligence community had stated earlier the biggest concern anyone held about arming the Libyan rebels was the possibility those weapons might leave the Libyan conflict and travel to other locations where they would be used against our own soldiers. More and more evidence of this happening was growing. Man-pads in Afghanistan. We had been in close-quarter full combat operations in Afghanistan for 10 years, and we never had a problem with close air support. We had never faced the concern of our enemy having man-pads. 2002 through 2010 saw 0 occurrences of SAMs, Stingers, or man-pads in general. In 2011, a total of 4 air assets were destroyed by enemy fire in Afghanistan. 2 of those helicopters happened at the same time in August 2011 when we lost the Navy SEAL unit that killed Osama bin Laden. 22 Americans killed, what came to be known as Operation Extortion 17. We had a serious problem and it was picking up speed. June 6, 2012, we lost another crew. July 25, 2012, yet another. August 16, 2012, again more losses. September 5, 2012, more deaths. It just kept getting worse. By September 5, 2012, in the preceding 9 months, we had lost 11 helicopters to shoulder-fired missiles in Afghanistan. One of the incidents revealed details of what was being faced. The July 25, 2012 downing of a CH-47, which was found to have been hit with a new generation Stinger missile. The risks were no longer mere worries, they were real. Confirmed, July 25, 2012. Taliban fighters in Kunar province successfully targeted a U.S. Army CH-47 helicopter with a new generation Stinger missile. They thought they had a surefire kill, but instead of bursting into flames, the Chinook just disappeared into the darkness as the American pilot recovered control of the aircraft and brought it to the ground in a hard landing. The assault team jumped out the open doors and ran clear in case it exploded. Less than 30 seconds later, the Taliban gunner and his comrade erupted into flames as a trailing American gunship overhead locked onto their position and opened fire. The next day, an explosive ordnance disposal team arrived to pick through the wreckage and found unexploded pieces of a missile casing that could only belong to a Stinger missile. Lodged in the right cabin, they found one fragment that contained an entire serial number. The investigation took time. Arms were twisted, noses put out of joint. But when the results came back, they were stunning. The stinger tracked back to a lot that had been signed out by the CIA. The cover-up. Reports of the stinger reached the highest echelons of the U.S. command in Afghanistan and became a source of intense speculation, but no action. Everyone knew the war was winding down. Revealing that the Taliban had U.S.-made stingers risked demoralizing coalition troops. Because there were no coalition casualties, government officials made no public announcement of the attack. Sources in the U.S. Special Operations community believe the stinger fired against the Chinook was part of the same lot the CIA turned over to the Qataris in early 2011. Weapons Hillary Rodham Clinton's State Department intended for anti-Gaddafi forces in Libya. They believe the Qataris delivered between 50 and 60 of those same stingers to the Taliban in early 2012, and an additional 200 SA-24 Igla-S surface-to-air missiles. In Afghanistan, the Department of Defense field response was immediate. All close air support was canceled. The White House had a problem. Operation Zero Footprint missiles were now being used against us. But the Department of Defense didn't know the origin because the Defense Department did not know about Operation Zero Footprint. The State Department and CIA did. Benghazi. Around May 26, 2012, Ambassador Chris Stevens sets up a formal U.S. embassy consulate in Tripoli, Libya. The State Department and CIA set up a joint operations in Benghazi about the same time. The President also signs a second presidential CIA directive to ship arms to Syria. Ambassador Chris Stevens goes to Benghazi. To the public, Stevens was a U.S. ambassador, a diplomat. The State Department and CIA, Stevens was a U.S. ambassador and a CIA operative coordinating arms sales out of Libya through the diplomatic couriers and into Syria. September 11, 2012. Perhaps following the fiasco at the port of Iskenderun a week earlier, Turkish diplomat Consul General Ali Sent Akin arrives at the Benghazi mission on September 11, 2012 to talk about the ongoing efforts to support Syria. Perhaps the conversation was about the increasing risk of arming a rising group of radicals against the backdrop of manpads being used against U.S. forces in the other fields of combat. Regardless of the motivation, Ali Sent Akin and Stevens were most certainly discussing the current situation, with Turkey suffering the consequences and pushing a greater sense of urgency. Indeed, Turkey's border region was filled with historic numbers of Syrian refugees fleeing the fighting, which was completely out of control. The scale of the crisis was staggering. Over 500,000 Syrians were now seeking shelter in Turkey. Meanwhile, the ideology of the radical elements controlling the arms shipments was openly becoming a danger to the entire region, and especially U.S. interests beyond Syria. This would have put Stevens and Akin as opposing ends of the issue. What we now know as ISIS originated inside this group of zero footprint recipients, and Erdogan, president of Turkey, while willing to see Assad removed, was also well aware that these elements do not believe in borders. These rabid ideologies, ISIS, were quickly revolving into a risk for the region. We can only imagine the conversation within the Benghazi compound as both Ali Sent Akin and Chris Stevens parted ways for the final time on September 11, 2012. Outside the compound walls, the 17th February Brigade and Ansar al-Sharia were assembled to deliver their final goodbyes. The Turkish delegation was able to navigate the roadblocks without issue, and within 30 minutes of Consul Akin leaving the venue, Ansar al-Sharia and the 17th February Brigade executed their attack.
The fact is, we had 4 dead Americans. Was it because of a protest, or was it because of guys out for a walk one night who decided they'd go kill some Americans? What difference at this point does it make?
Benghazi Connection. Representative Mike Rogers. He was the former chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. He now does a radio commentary on Cumulus Media called Something to Think About. He is a pundit for CNN and does commercials for LifeLock. Back in January of 2013, Rogers laid out his priorities for the new House Intelligence Committee members. Benghazi was not on the list. He said the issue was in the past, and they would not be devoting significant time and resources to investigating it. In the months that followed, more troubling details about Benghazi emerged. None of this convinced Rogers to make Benghazi a priority. This frustrated many of the committee's members. Boehner received a steady stream of visits and phone calls from House members saying Rogers wasn't doing his job. Boehner decided to impanel a select committee to conduct a comprehensive investigation of the Benghazi attacks in early 2013. The report was done by the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, chaired by Representative Mike Rogers. The report was released on November 20th, 2014. The report found no evidence to support allegations the Obama administration gave a stand-down order or denied available air support to Benghazi during the assault, rejecting claims that have fed persistent conspiracy theories that the U.S. military was prevented from rescuing U.S. personnel from Benghazi, or the administration sought to mislead the public. And the committee determined that the attack could not be blamed on an intelligence failure prior to the attacks. For those following the story, the report was bizarre and troubling. Key events were left out, important figures never mentioned. Well-known controversies were omitted. John Teagan, former CIA officer who fought on the ground in Benghazi, said there are so many mistakes, it's hard to know where to begin. How can an official government report get so many things wrong, Teagan said. It was like a high school paper. I would give it an F. Teagan also said that the report attempts to settle the much debated question whether anyone on the ground that night was given an order to stand down, to abort an attempted rescue before it began. The report resolves the debate, as does virtually every disputed point, in favor of the intelligence community leadership. The report says no officer at the CIA was ever told to stand down. This is categorically false, says Teagan. I was told to stand down. The chief of the base was looking directly into my eyes when he used those words, to stand down. Chris Peranto and Mark Geis, two other CIA officials on the ground in Benghazi, are also frustrated by the report. Geis says, "It's ironic that Representative Rogers shook my hand and said thanks for coming in. I found you guys very credible. If we were so credible, why did he write a report that ignored so much of what we said?" Representative Tom Rooney, a Florida Republican, said, "I don't think this is an official government report. It's Mike Rogers' report. The members of his own committee don't even agree with it, which included Representative Mac Thornberry, Texas, and Representative Peter King, New York. Krista Rogers. After years of government service in mid-level positions, she moved to the private sector, joining the British-based security contractor Aegis Defense Services to help open its U.S. subsidiary. She was named Executive Vice President when the U.S. branch opened in 2006. She was promoted to President in 2008 and added the position of CEO in 2009. In 2011, Ms. Rogers was named Vice Chairman of the company's Board of Directors. Aegis has been operating in Libya since February 2011. They were to provide security in Libya, the American compound and annex in Benghazi, part of Ms. Rogers' responsibility. Security for the Benghazi compound and annex was given to the February 17th Martyrs Brigade, Libyan terrorists. They ended up abandoning their post and joining Ansar al-Sharia, who attacked the CIS compound in Benghazi, where Ambassador Chris Stevens and Sean Smith were killed. Benghazi was attacked on September 11, 2012. December 2012, Krista Rogers left Aegis and joined the law firm Manette as a managing director for federal government affairs. On March 28, 2014, Representative Mike Rogers announced he was not running for re-election from his safe congressional seat and chairmanship of the House Intelligence Committee to become a talk radio host. 2 weeks earlier on March 14th, Ms. Rogers left Manette. Her departure was not announced, and her association with the firm has been scrubbed from its website. Ms. Rogers and Manette did not respond to email questions and interview requests from Judicial Watch, along with the State Department and the CIA also did not respond to questions about Aegis either. John Shaw, a formal official of Department of Defense and part of the Independent Citizens Commission on Benghazi, which is made up of retired military, CIA officers, and media people, said, "There's no question in my mind that Representative Rogers compromised the Intelligence Committee report on Benghazi in order to protect his wife." Shaw also said, once the connections come out between Aegis and the February 17th Martyrs Brigade, the information will fry Rogers and his wife publicly in the process. The information provided in the Benghazi connection is Micah Morrison of Judicial Watch, Stephen Hayes, Weekly Standard, and the Independent Citizens Commission on Benghazi.
I see nothing. I know nothing. I see nothing. I know nothing.